Welcome to the Cheating Secrets channel. We hope you enjoy today's story.
I believe that most men find out about their wife's affair by coming home at the wrong time, overhearing a careless conversation, or finding tangible evidence, such as stained underwear. For me, it was much simpler. My wife sent me an email. Actually, Anne did not write to me intentionally, though Freudians might say otherwise. I assume her email program automatically suggested my name as the recipient, and she clicked on it without checking. This is, of course, easy to do, especially if you are in a hurry. In any case, I was astonished to receive a note from my wife, after 18 years of marriage, titled, "About Yesterday." Since yesterday was a rather ordinary Wednesday, I wondered why Anne would email me about it. Opening the message, I read, "Dear, I just wanted to tell you again how wonderful yesterday was. You made me feel something I haven't felt in many years. I simply can't wait until next week. Your sexy lady." I was at work all day on Wednesday, and as far as I knew, so was Anne. We didn't even speak on the phone that day, although I remember she was unusually cheerful when she came home in the evening. Moreover, I had never called her affectionate names like sexy lady. The disgusting betrayal was obvious, and my first thought was to confront her that evening and demand an explanation, or more likely, a confession. But I am a logical and methodical person. It didn't take much imagination to guess that she might deny the letter's significance, concoct some alternative explanation, or just pass it off as a joke. What could I then say? Besides, my unfounded accusations would have alerted her, and I likely wouldn't have found out anything. After some thought, I decided to wait. Firstly, it would be interesting, even amusing, to see if Anne realized her mistake and decided to explain herself to me. If not, then I was forewarned and could appropriately use the information about her next meeting. Anne sells real estate, so her working hours are usually irregular. Tonight, she came home much later than me. I watched her carefully but found her behavior to be absolutely normal in all respects. If she knew the letter was sent by mistake, she did not show it. I, for my part, did not even hint that something was wrong. The whole evening passed routinely, but when we went to bed, I felt sleep eluding me. Instead, I lay there, analyzing my problem from every angle, trying to figure out if I could unravel the knot. There remained, of course, the possibility that there was a perfectly innocent explanation. If that were the case, not only would I have made a fool of myself by acting rashly, but I would have also harmed our marriage. I loved my wife, and the last thing I wanted was to do anything that might push her away from me. On the other hand, if the letter did indicate an ongoing affair, then my marriage was already under threat, and in that case, I would have to take action. Just because I try to control my emotions doesn't mean I don't have them. As I tossed and turned in bed, the pain of potential betrayal by my wife deeply gnawed at me. After much reflection, I concluded that my only option was to delay dealing with this issue until I could gather more accurate information. Fortunately, I was able to do that, and as soon as I realized it, I soon fell asleep. The next morning, upon arriving at work, I returned to analyzing the problem. The upcoming Wednesday was expected to provide some answers. Therefore, I contacted a detective agency and arranged for them to follow my wife. If she did nothing unusual on Wednesday, it wouldn't completely alleviate my fears, but I would certainly feel better. However, if my suspicions were justified, then at least I would know the truth and start taking appropriate measures. Having done all I could at that moment, I set it aside and returned to my work. As it turned out, the next Wednesday was no different from any other day. Anne and I, as usual, went to work and came back home late in the evening at almost the same time. There was nothing in her appearance or behavior that seemed abnormal or unusual to me. I sat in my office, reading my favorite collection of stories by Edgar Allan Poe, and tried my best to hide any signs of anxiety and suspicion. On Thursday morning, I had an appointment with the detective agency to find out the results of their surveillance. Although I'm not very emotional, I can still read emotions in others. When I entered the office, the detective handling my case avoided eye contact with me. I immediately understood that I wouldn't like what he was about to tell me. It was just as I had feared. My wife left the real estate agency where she works, and the detective followed her to a cheap motel near the airport. He handed me photographs of her meeting a man there and entering a room with him. The timestamp on the photograph showed 13:52, and about 2 hours later, another photograph showed them leaving the room together, holding hands. "I'm very sorry," the detective said. "We always find it unpleasant to confirm your suspicions. What would you like us to do for you now? I paused for a moment. I need your help again. It seems this motel is their regular meeting place. If that's true, is there any way to take photographs of what happens inside the room? The detective didn't hesitate. We have extensive experience in obtaining such evidence. We'll probably have to pay the motel manager for cooperation, but if that's acceptable to you, I think we can guarantee to get the job done. I nodded. The evidence will be paid for. I returned to my office, but this time, to my surprise, I found I couldn't concentrate on work. Now that all doubts were removed, my ability to think seemed to have vanished. Eventually, I gave up trying to work and focused on what I had learned. Wiping my eyes, I began to make plans. In addition to confirming my wife's infidelity, I understood why Anne had accidentally sent that treacherous email to me instead of him. It turned out that I knew her lover. It was our neighbor, Mark Bradshaw. Since my name is Mac Bishop, the email program must have suggested my name after Anne typed the first 2 letters. Very careless of her not to double-check, I thought, but then, emotions do have a way of distracting lovers. Knowing the identity of Anne's lover intensified my sense of betrayal. Mark and his wife, Bobby, were our friends. We often dined at each other's homes or went to the movies together, and I had never noticed any particular spark between Anne and Mark. Was I blind, or were they both just good at deceiving? Either way, I knew I had to do something. The question was, what exactly? For several hours, I mentally went through various courses of action. At times, fantasies of revenge flashed through my mind, followed by scenarios where I begged Anne not to leave. Questions about how the affair started and how long it had been going tormented me. Anger and self-pity intertwined within me. Finally, I made a decision. Not only did I know what I wanted to achieve, but I also had a well-thought-out plan to reach my goals. My campaign would involve 2 separate courses of action, to be executed simultaneously. I thought of them as, divide and conquer, separate the 2 lovers and win her heart back. As part of the divisive phase of my plan, I would use my knowledge of Anne and to some extent of Mark to drive a wedge between them. If lucky, I could disrupt their relationship until they decided to part ways themselves. The second part would involve a total campaign to win back Anne's love, becoming the ideal husband. At the same time, as I showed her the other side of her relationship with Mark, I hoped to demonstrate the advantages of resuming our relationship. I made extensive notes for myself, listing possible actions for each part of my campaign, planning their timing, and working out the interactions so that each would complement the other. When I finished, I realized that a key element for both was the need to keep him unaware of my knowledge of their affair. Obviously, this would require restraint on my part, but I felt I could manage it. I am good at hiding my emotions. I decided not to start my campaign until I received the next report from the detective agency. However, there were steps I could take in the meantime to prepare. First, I bought a recording system for our home phones, as well as a voice-activated recording device that I hid in Anne's car. Monitoring our home phone covered that channel of communication, and although I couldn't tap into her mobile phone, I felt that the car was the most likely place for her to call Mark. I wasn't worried about her calling him from work. The agency had an open plan office, so I reasoned that she would be unlikely to discuss things with her lover where she could be easily overheard. My next step was to hack into Anne's email. Our home computer was already set up to access her work email. She had password protected her system, but I knew where she kept her list of passwords, and it didn't take me long to gain access. I quickly arranged for copies of all messages to be forwarded to my address. Once I accessed the email, I soon learned that their affair seemed to be going on for only a month or so. This suggested that their relationship was still in the honeymoon phase. My task was to end this honeymoon phase as soon as possible. Having done the preliminary work, all that was left was to wait for the detective agency to prepare the photographs of their next meeting. In addition to the photos, they surprised me by providing video and audio. It was an unpleasant surprise. Bracing myself, I watched them having sex. What I hadn't expected was the tenderness and, dare I say it, love between them. The depth of their intimacy painfully struck me. It made me wonder if my plan had any real chance of success. But in the end, I had nothing to lose, so I proceeded with what was planned. My wife is not very patient and takes disappointments badly. I hoped to use this weakness against her to disrupt the relationship she had established with Mark. At the same time, she is very romantic, and I felt that this could be leveraged for the other part of my plan. Having copies of all her emails gave me an undeniable advantage when it came to planning my intervention program. Their next exchange of messages gave me everything I needed to start the divide part of my plan. Are we still on for Wednesday, Anne? Absolutely. Same time, same place. Can't wait, Mark. On the day of their next meeting, I drove to Anne's office and parked around the corner to remain unseen. As soon as she returned from lunch and went inside, I casually walked past her parking spot, looked around to ensure no one was watching, and then crouched next to her car. It only took me a minute to unscrew the valve cap on the tire and let out the air. Then I returned to my car and drove back to my place. I wondered what she would do without any men in the office to help. Sure enough, 20 minutes before she was supposed to meet Mark at the motel, Anne called me. Can you help me? Don't worry, honey, I said reassuringly. Work is pretty light today, so I can fix your car. I just need to finish something here, and then I'll come right over. Of course, I waited another 15 minutes before leaving, which meant I wouldn't get to her agency until almost the time of her meeting with Mark. She was waiting impatiently by her car. Sorry I'm late, I apologized. It took longer than I expected. As she paced back and forth in despair, I slowly and methodically changed the tire. I parked my car right behind hers to load the flat tire into the trunk and take it for repair, which also conveniently prevented her from leaving until I was done. By the time I had put on the spare, placed the flat tire in the car, and returned after washing my hands, it was more than an hour past the time she was supposed to meet Mark. I apologized to her again for the delay and mentioned that I hoped it wouldn't affect her relationship with the client. He just has to understand, she said submissively. These things happen sometimes. While I was changing the tire, I heard her mobile phone ring several times, but although she checked it, she didn't talk. She probably saw that Mark was calling and didn't want to speak with him in my presence. My suspicions were later confirmed when I returned to my office and saw the anxious exchange between them. Where are you? I've been waiting at the motel for over an hour, Mark. Damn, the car had a flat tire. Anne, you could have at least called to let me know. I booked a room, Mark. Mac was here, changing the tire. I couldn't talk with you in his presence. Good, I thought. It seems I've put a strain on their plans. That evening after dinner, I led Anne to the couch, where I placed her feet on my lap and gave her a foot massage. She looked at me quizzically because she usually has to ask me for this. I know you had a tough day, honey, and I just wanted to do something nice for you, I told her. She looked at me to see if I was hinting at something else, but as I continued to smile and work on her feet, Anne relaxed on the couch. Soon, I saw a look of pleasure on her face, and as I continued the massage, her quiet moans of delight were sweet music to my ears. Not wanting to seem too eager, I waited for the rest of the week before taking the next step. On Monday, a large floral arrangement was delivered to her office with a card reading, "To the best wife a man could have." If she felt any guilt because of my irony, she hid it well. But that evening, when she returned home, she warmly thanked me and mentioned how impressed the other women in the office were. But what's the occasion? She asked. You've never done anything like this before. Absolutely right, dear, I said, hugging her, and that's what I want to change. What if you had a flat tire while driving on the highway? It made me realize how much I value your love, and I wanted to make sure you knew that. She looked at me searchingly, but after a minute's hesitation, she hugged me tightly. That's so sweet of you, dear. It really means a lot to me. I couldn't help but wonder if she felt guilty. From her emails, I learned that the lovers planned to make up for lost time at a special meeting in a few days. I wanted to disrupt their plans, but this time I felt it might be suspicious if I tampered with Anne's car again. So, I let her go to the meeting without interference, but followed her from a distance to avoid being noticed. While she entered the room booked by Mark, I drove behind the motel and entered through a side door. The motel was modest enough to lack surveillance cameras that could record me triggering the fire alarm in the corridor. I waited outside until I saw the guests being herded to a safe place in the parking lot. I didn't see Anne and Mark, but I knew they must be in the crowd, probably as furious as wet hens. Back in the safety of my office, I delightedly watched as emails flew between the two frustrated lovers. Anne, what a mess. I'm so angry I could scream. Mark, I'm so sorry, but it wasn't my fault. Anne, next time, book a place that isn't a fire trap. Yes, that sounds like my Anne, I thought. When she returned from work, she was still fuming. But her irritation turned to surprise when she noticed that the dining table was set with linen napkins and our fine china. And when she smelled her favorite dish simmering on the stove, she looked at me with feigned suspicion. "Who are you, and what have you done with my husband?" she asked with a broad smile on her face. "Nothing special," I modestly replied. "I called your office this afternoon, and when they told me you were in a delayed meeting with a client, I figured the last thing you'd want to do is cook when you got home." Fear flickered across her face, but she quickly recovered and hugged me around the neck. "That's so sweet of you, dear," she said. "You treat me so well." After dinner, I resolved not to let her help with the dishes. She looked at me appreciatively as I ushered her into the living room and turned on her favorite TV show. Going back to the kitchen, I felt her watching me and decided that the conquering part of my campaign was progressing well. Whatever doubts Anne might have had about her affair, the next email I intercepted from Mark made it clear that no temporary setbacks would stop him. He was eager to try my wife's sweetness again and intended to up the ante to get it. "Mark. Okay, no more cheap motels, sexy lady. This time I've booked a room at the Hyatt. We can finally spend some quality time together. Anne. That's much better. See you there at the usual time." Reading their email exchange, I cursed Mark's persistence and regretted that Anne was willing to continue their interlude. Other measures were needed. I waited until noon the day before they were supposed to meet, and then I called the Hyatt's reservation desk. "This is Mark Bradshaw. I have a room booked for tomorrow, but something has come up, and I won't be able to make it. I'm afraid I have to cancel the reservation." "No problem, sir," the clerk replied. "Actually, we have a big conference planned, and your cancellation will really help us out." I smiled with satisfaction. Having done my part, I couldn't resist showing up at the Hyatt just to see what would happen. I sat in a chair with a view of the reception and hid behind a newspaper. Sure enough, the amorous duo appeared right on time, walking hand in hand, chatting and cooing like doves. Their romantic mood was short-lived, however, as they soon found out that they had no room. "But I booked a room several days ago," Mark exclaimed to the bewildered clerk. "I'm terribly sorry." The poor girl apologized, "but according to my computer, your reservation was cancelled." "That's ridiculous," snorted Mark. "Very well, make us a new reservation." The girl sadly shook her head. "I'm sorry, sir, but the hotel is fully booked. And unfortunately, due to the convention in town, most other major hotels are also sold out. But you might have luck at one of the small motels near the airport." When Anne heard the last remark, her face turned red, and she clenched her fists. While Mark continued to rage at the counter, she angrily tugged at his sleeve. "Never mind," she hissed loudly, "let's just get out of here. I'm not in the mood anyway." With those words, she turned and strode toward the parking lot, with Mark following her, trying to calm her down and suggesting alternatives. It was clear that he wasn't having much luck. I waited until they both drove away in their cars before leaving my spot in the lobby. My job here is done, I thought with glee. When Anne returned home that evening, I stopped her at the door. "Don't even bother going inside, we're leaving." Before she could object, I took her by the hand and led her to my car. Holding the door open for her, I walked around the car and got behind the wheel. "What is all this about?" she asked. "Where are we going?" "I decided you're in for a little surprise tonight," I told her with a smile. With that, I turned on the radio to some soft music and continued driving in silence. She watched me curiously, trying to guess what I had planned. She clearly became anxious when she saw me pulling into the parking lot of the Hyatt. "Why are we going here?" she asked nervously. "You'll see," I winked. Entering the hotel elevator, I pressed the button for the top floor, and soon we were in the rooftop restaurant of the Hyatt with its signature revolving dome. I approached the maitre d' and gave my name. "Ah, here you are, right on time," he said. With those words, he led us to a table on the outer edge, where we could enjoy the city lights. "Why did you choose this place?" Anne asked suspiciously. "No special reason, I just thought it would be a wonderful setting for my lovely wife." She smiled tensely at my compliment. "But how did you manage to get us a table? I heard there's a big convention in town today." "Oh, that's no problem," I said casually. "I called today and made a reservation." Anne didn't respond to my comment, but I knew my success sharply contrasted with Mark's fiasco. In fact, I had booked the table as soon as I learned about their rendezvous plans. I took the liberty of ordering, I continued. "I hope you don't mind?" She said she was grateful for my thoughtfulness and relaxed. Her delight grew when the waiter brought in a bucket of ice and a bottle of champagne. After we made several toasts, which I offered in her honor, she genuinely cheered up. And when the waiter served oysters on the half shell, she was thrilled. I'm not a big fan of oysters, but Anne loves them. For the main course, the waiter brought a niçoise salad with salmon and black olive sauce, which impressed Anne. I thought you'd order something heavy, like a big steak, she said with a smile. This is perfect. I know you love salads, darling, I told her. Besides, we don't want to overeat. She gave me a questioning look, but I said nothing more. For dessert, the waiter brought 2 bowls of fresh raspberries with a dollop of whipped cream and glasses of Grand Marnier. It was the perfect finish, and Anne enjoyed it all. On the drive home, Anne unbuckled her seatbelt and snuggled up to me. It seemed the alcohol and oysters had the desired effect. Moreover, I sensed she must have been upset and excited after the failures of her recent dates. Once home, I led her straight upstairs to our bedroom. Why don't you change into your nightgown, I suggested, while I take care of a few things. As she turned to the wardrobe, I dashed down the hall to the guest bedroom to make sure everything was ready. Coming back, I was pleased to see she had chosen a sheer black nightgown that both concealed and revealed the contours of her body. I led her down the hall to the guest bedroom, where scented candles now illuminated the space around the open bed. While she stood, astonished at my preparations, I approached from behind and blindfolded her. Touch and smell will be the only senses you'll need tonight, I said as I led her to the bed and began undressing her. Then I laid her down on the fresh linen sheet. Smell this, I said, wafting a bottle of almond oil under her nose. Then I poured some oil into my hands to warm it and started massaging her legs. She moaned with pleasure as I gave her a brief leg massage, but this time I didn't linger there. Soon I began moving upward, paying attention to her calf and thigh muscles, ensuring she was completely relaxed. I saw her buttocks tense in anticipation. When I reached her fingertips, I carefully turned her onto her stomach and repeated the same process up her back. I massaged the muscles of her buttocks and back firmly but not painfully until she moaned with pleasure again. I lingered as long as I could until my own passion took over and I pulsed in her as fast and strong as I could. Her moans turned into a long, drawn-out scream, echoed by my own growl, until we both exploded and collapsed. Coming to my senses, I removed the blindfold from her face. Her eyes were closed. She had either fainted or collapsed from exhaustion. Taking a deep breath, I picked her up, carried her to the bedroom, and laid her on the bed. Then I covered her with a sheet, and she quickly fell asleep. I quickly washed up with a sponge in the sink before returning to bed. Falling asleep, I was very satisfied with how the evening had gone. Usually, Anne and I have different schedules for getting up for work, but the next morning she got up early. Coming downstairs, I found she had already made coffee and breakfast for me. When I looked at her, her eyes sparkled. Thank you, darling. Last night was really special for me, she said warmly. I'm so glad you enjoyed it, I replied. I know I'll remember it for a long, long time. She smiled at me. I felt that Anne and I were making real progress, but later that same day, I intercepted an email exchange that let me know Mark was still trying to meet up with her. Mark. I'm really sorry about what happened yesterday at the Hyatt. I still don't know how they managed to lose my reservation. Anne. I don't know, Mark, maybe it just wasn't meant to be. Mark. Don't say that, sexy lady. Let me make it up to you. Is there any chance you can get away on Saturday? Bobby is out of town, and we could spend the day at our lake house. No booking mix-ups, no fire alarms, just pure love. Anne. Mac always plays golf on Saturdays. I could probably slip away while he's there. Mark. Great, I can't wait to touch your hot body again. It was clear to me that my campaign had reached a critical point. I felt that both divide and conquer were gaining momentum, but I needed to act this weekend or I would lose everything I had achieved so far. Their new plans posed a real problem for me. Canceling my golf game wasn't an option. Anne could always pretend to go shopping or find another excuse to leave. I dared not tamper with her car again. Everything could be lost if she became suspicious. And unlike a motel or hotel, it was not easy for me to meddle with Mark's lake house. I needed a way to make Anne change her plans, preferably at the last minute. Suddenly, a brilliant idea struck me, the perfect solution. Moreover, it only took one phone call to prepare. I followed my usual routine until the end of the week, but on Friday evening, I surreptitiously grabbed Anne's mobile phone and replaced the battery with a dead one. If she tries to call Mark over the weekend, it would only be through the home phone, allowing me to eavesdrop on the conversation. On weekends, Anne and I usually dress quite casually. But on Saturday morning, I noted with interest that she had put on a nice skirt and blouse. I lazily wondered what kind of underwear she might be wearing underneath. As the time for my departure to the golf course approached, I noticed Anne watching me with some trepidation, probably because I hadn't made any move to put on my usual golf trousers and shirt. By the usual 10 a.m. departure time, and as I showed no sign of leaving, I could see the wheels turning in her head, preparing an excuse for why she needed to go. Finally, she became so impatient that she addressed me. "Aren't you playing golf today?" she asked demandingly. Then the doorbell rang. Anne looked at me puzzled and went to see who it was. Opening the door, she exclaimed in surprise, "Miriam, what are you doing here? Is that how you greet your little sister?" Miriam asked, stepping inside. The women embraced warmly. "Of course, I'm happy to see you," Anne mumbled. "I just wasn't expecting you." Miriam smiled at me. "I'm here because your wonderful husband invited me. He called me earlier in the week to say you had no plans and suggested we spend the weekend together. We haven't seen each other in so long." I jumped at the chance. Anne and Miriam were very close. There wasn't a week they didn't talk on the phone. However, because Miriam lived 200 miles away, they didn't often visit each other. "How wonderful that you're here," said Anne to Miriam. Then she turned to me. "This is really great, Mac. Now I know why you're not playing golf." "Well, nothing is more important than giving my wife some time with her sister," I said to them. "And now, ladies, I want you to get ready because I'm inviting you out for breakfast." Then I looked at them again. "Actually, Miriam, you might want to change into something more formal than your jeans, but you look lovely just as you are." Anne looked at herself and blushed, remembering why she had dressed that way. But she quickly recovered. "Why don't you help Miriam take her bag to the guest room? While she's changing, I'll just make a quick call." I watched her walk down the hallway, and a minute later, I heard muffled curses. She came out holding her unresponsive mobile phone. "Damn battery's dead," she said angrily. "Oh, dear, that's too bad," I sympathized. "But you can use the landline." "Never mind," she said hastily. "It wasn't that important anyway. Now, where are we having breakfast?" I spent the rest of the weekend engaging with the sisters, making sure they had a good time. When Miriam was leaving on Sunday afternoon, she gave me a special hug and thanked me. "You have a special husband," she told Anne. "Take good care of him." It seemed to me that Anne winced slightly, but then she smiled and hugged me. "Of course," she promised. I was confident Anne had found time over the weekend to call Mark, but I wasn't worried. If the call was made from our landline, I had a record of it. After Anne went to bed on Sunday evening, I checked the recording device. Indeed, the call had been made early Sunday morning. "Anne. Mark, it's me, Anne. Mark. Where the hell have you been? You didn't show up on Saturday, and every time I tried to call you, your phone went straight to voicemail. Anne. I'm really sorry, but there was nothing I could do. My sister unexpectedly came into town on Saturday morning, and my phone was dead. I haven't had a chance to talk to you until now. Mark. Couldn't you have left on Saturday afternoon? Anne. I couldn't, Mark. On Saturday, Mac took us all around the city. Mark. What about today? Anne. My sister came for the weekend. I just can't leave her. We haven't seen each other in months. Mark. Well, I feel damn stupid, sitting at the lake house with my instrument in hand all day waiting for you. Anne. Do you ever think about anything other than your instrument? Mark. Fine, I guess I see where I stand with you. Anne. Let's not fight about this. Listen, I have to go. I don't want Mac to catch me off guard. Their conversation thrilled me. Their frustration seemed about to boil over, and I felt I had dealt a serious blow to their relationship. I hoped it would be enough. Checking their emails on Monday, I found confirmation of my assessment. Mark. Are we still on for this week? Anne. I don't think so, Mark. This is getting too complicated, and it's starting to annoy me. Besides, Mac has been really sweet to me lately, and I feel quite guilty sneaking around behind his back. I think we need to end this. Mark. Don't say that, Anne. At least one more time. Anne. No, I'm serious, it's over. Mark. Well, I can't say I'm not disappointed. You're still a sexy lady, but I understand what you're saying. Maybe it's for the best. I don't want to lose Bobby either. But I hope we can still be friends. Anne. Of course. We'll remain friends, just not with benefits. Success. I had caused enough trouble in their relationship to bring it crashing down. Now I just needed to complete the second part of my plan. When Anne came home that evening, she was somber and distracted. Once or twice, I even thought I saw tears in her eyes. I didn't want to pry, but I felt I shouldn't completely ignore her mood. "Are you okay, darling?" I asked with concern. "You seem out of sorts today. Trouble at work?" "It's nothing serious," she said, not looking at me. "Probably just in a bad mood. Maybe it's hormones or something." I nodded and gave her some space to recover. But inwardly, I gloated, sure that she was mourning the end of her relationship with Mark. Although it was her decision to end the affair, I knew Anne invested a lot of emotion in her relationships and couldn't end them without some sense of loss. To me, her mood was reassuring. She wouldn't be so sad if she hadn't decided to end it. Yet I couldn't shake the thought that Mark probably wouldn't have a similar reaction. "He's probably having fun with Bobby," I thought with a sneer. The next morning, Anne was in a much better emotional state. Throughout the day, I no longer saw any emails between Mark and her, which bolstered my confidence that neither of them had second thoughts. This gave me a growing sense of triumph. Everything was going as I had planned. That evening after dinner, when Anne entered the study, I was once again holding a book by Edgar Allan Poe on my lap. "What are you reading this time?" she asked. "One of my favorites," I told her, "The Cask of Amontillado." "I don't know that one," she said. Then she snuggled up to me. "Can I interrupt you for a minute? I just wanted you to know what a wonderful husband I have," she said earnestly, looking into my eyes. "You've been so sweet to me these past few weeks, and I feel very lucky to have you." My heart soared at these words, and I knew I had won. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I looked at her, anticipating what she would say next. She fell silent, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of guilt cross her face. Her eyes seemed to moisten. "I really don't deserve you," she said passionately. "No," I said calmly, "it's me who doesn't deserve you." Then I reached into the desk drawer. "And I certainly didn't deserve this," I said sharply, tossing the photos of her meeting with Mark at the motel onto her lap. At first, she looked at me in confusion due to the change in my tone, then she slowly realized what I had given her. But as she focused on the photos and recognized what they depicted, she started to wail. "Oh God, no, no." I handed her a copy of the divorce papers that my lawyer had filed earlier that day. When she realized what I had given her, she gasped. "But I thought you and I mean, isn't there any way?" "No," I coldly interrupted her, handing her another stack of papers. "And in case you're interested in Mark, here's a copy of the letter I sent to Bobby tonight along with the detective's report. I also sent a similar letter to your sister Miriam, explaining why I am divorcing you." She moaned in pain and cried again. "I just don't understand. You were so loving and caring these past weeks. I can't believe you're being so cruel now. Doesn't it all mean anything?" "My dear," I said in an even voice, "when you started your sordid little affair, you ended all my love for you. So I spent the last few weeks ending your affair with Mark. As for how I treated you, well, I wanted to make sure you understood how much you lost when you betrayed me. My goal was to take from you what you took from me, and as far as I can tell, my plan worked perfectly." Anne collapsed on the sofa, sobbing pitifully. Before leaving, I placed the Poe storybook I had been reading on top of the other documents. The text was still open to "The Cask of Amontillado," and I used a marker to highlight the Montresor family motto, "No one insults me with impunity."
Thank you for being with us and listening until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments. And we'll see you on the Cheating Secrets channel.